digital workshop. We were planning actually all of this to be face-to-face at Bangkok Design Week, but we're actually really happy about how we have the opportunity to welcome so many people from across the world as well. So as I mentioned, my name is Courtney Savvy Lawrence, and you're going to get to meet a lot of the Circular Design Lab over the next hour. We have amazing folks gathered to tell you a little bit more about what we'll do. But this is a Systems Innovation Design 101 workshop. And because you filled out a registration form, we got to learn a little bit about your background and what you're interested in. We know that the spectrum of what your exposure to systems and innovation, design, all of that actually ranges. So we want to do this justice and try to meet you where you are. And just also mention that this is a two-part workshop. So today is just part A. It's 1 hour to give you a sense of what's happening. Before we have our part B, which is next month, we'll also be sending some materials over email to help build a little bit more of a bridge between the content. So next slide, please. Great. When we started the Circular Design Lab, it's a 100% volunteer-driven initiative. We started literally with just a workshop, a series of workshops, and we were focused on a few things. We wanted to ask, how could we actually create impact larger than just a small group, but something of scale? How could we also tap into the talent and the skills that people around the community bring to the table? But also, what does it look like when you combine a systems perspective with a design perspective when we're thinking about tackling some of the most complex challenges that exist in the world? If you've seen the website or some of the materials, you know that we've also focused on waste management, unsustainable fast fashion, pollution, and we're also looking at exploring plastics, food systems, and other topics. But it's basically depends on what the community wants to work on. And when we say community, that means you. So we hope you get involved with us over the next, well, obviously with the workshop, but then perhaps over the next few months as we move forward. And we can go to the next slide. So some of the backstory we'll share, and really what we wanted to do is just share the three main goals first. Next slide, please. What's really key is community. In a way, it's amazing that the world's more connected than ever, but sometimes we don't feel as though we really have that understanding of who's right there next to us, curious about the same things that we're curious about. So creating community, although it sounds pretty, you know, something we hear all the time, we mean it in a very sincere way. And that means bringing people together in spaces to create interesting conversations, but also with the next slide, we want to build skills. And when we say build skills, we want to create new capacity, new capabilities for co-imagining, co-dreaming, and co-creating future possibilities. And then ultimately, a little bit more specifically to our third goal, we want to be using systemic design to drive beneficial change. And so today is a bit of an intro into some elements of systemic design. And we hope that we can explain it in a way that kind of makes sense. And if you've already been working in this space, then we'd obviously be open to getting other feedback too. But I think I will hand it over to Chris to share a little bit more. And maybe before that, I'll just mention that in terms of your facilitators over today, as well as next month, you'll be with us, the co-founders, which originally we all met teaching at Thammasat University at the School of Global Studies and Social Entrepreneurship. And we've been very lucky to welcome back a returnee to Thailand, that's Poom, who's centered there in the middle of the photo, who's been working on environmental complexity and climate innovation out of Amsterdam for the past few years, but has rejoined in Bangkok. So he'll also be joining next month too.
Okay. Just really quickly, we want to thank the Incubation Network out of Singapore. They've provided some funding to help us with this series of workshops, so we greatly appreciate that. Next slide. And just so you guys know, we're working on a plastic waste pre-incubator. We're still planning. It's not confirmed when we're going to do that. Our goal is to wait a little bit and see if we can do something in person this fall. That's the hope, because we love to work in person. But the goal of this program will be to put together teams, come up with ideas that then might be able to go into incubation programs. TIN is connected to a lot of funding for plastic waste projects, so it's an interesting possibility. So stay tuned for that one. Next slide.
So one thing we want to mention is that in terms of what to expect, well, certainly we're talking about complex issues, which means that we cannot predict exactly what's going to be going on. But the process tools themselves We're going to be zooming in and zooming out in regards to exploring problem space and opportunity space. But it's an emergent process and it's an evolving process. And what that means is that it's not necessarily always the most easy thing to work through. So if you go to the next slide, we wanted to just mention that in a way, visually, this is kind of the trajectory of how it might look when we talk about a full process around systems design. Today, we're actually going to just share one tool specifically that we'll tell you about in a moment. But we're going to be building a series of workshops coming up in the next few months. But just say it's usually quite abstract in the front. And if you go to the next slide, Prewa, in reality, it actually might feel a little bit more like that. So we're building skills around dealing with ambiguity and that kind of challenge as well.
All right, so the lecture begins. So before we dive into the system design, some of you might wonder what exactly is the system. So just a question, the starting question. You can type in the chat, which one do you think is a system? The figure A or figure B? B. Okay, so like 100% B. Thank you for all the answers. So yeah, you're all right. So B is the system because actually you can see the interconnections between the elements of the system, and also the figure B actually produce some of the outcome from the system, which is to emit light. And figure A is basically a heap or collections because there are no real interconnections or relationships between the elements. And they also don't really create a shared outcome. So a system is a collection of interconnected elements that collectively produce an outcome. And if you look at the components of the system, we have, first of all, elements. Elements are different forces or parts that comprise the system. And here we have light bulb, we have switch, we have battery. We also have interconnections, which is the relationship between, sorry, I got a little bit of interconnection, which is the relationships between elements of the system or interdependencies between elements of the system. And then you have the purpose, which is what a system actually does, what it actually produces as the outcome. So here it's about emitting light, and the interconnection is the flow of the electricity. Also, it's important to note that part can actually affect systems behaviors or its properties when the system is taken apart. Like if you take the battery apart or the switch apart, the system can no longer function or it loses essential properties. So a system is not the sum of behaviors or properties of its parts, but it's the product of their interactions or interrelationship. So we actually are living with systems every day. We are systems and we have different level of systems around us. So a heart is actually a system because that, with the goal of pumping blood and consists of many, many elements that interrelate to each other. A heart is also part of another system, which is the circulatory system. So it circulates blood throughout the body. A car is a system that provides transportation. So you can see that each of the systems has its own goal. Refrigerator are systems that keep things cold. And Chris, do you want to chime in? Chris, you are on mute.
Thank you. Sorry, messing up stuff in the background. So I just wanted to mention one thing really quickly here as we're talking about what systems are and that they're the product of the interactions. Something that happened to me that was really, really interesting, and I think anyone who learns this stuff will experience something similar. The next time you go into a wooded area, into a forest or something, take a look at it and see if it appears different to you. When you stop thinking about trees and grass and mushrooms and dirt and animals and start thinking about the interactions between them and the way nutrients cycle and the way energy cycles and all of that, it really takes on a different meaning and appearance. And it's something I enjoy much more now. So at risk of sounding like a crazy hippie, it's really, really different and meaningful to me now. So just wanted to share that really quickly. Next slide.
Okay, so we are systems. Do you want to share a little bit more, Chris? Or
No, that was it.
okay. So you can see that we are actually systems, and we are part of we are part of systems and living in systems. And there are different layers, different scales of a system. We have systems within systems as well. And we're actually dealing with complex systems. When you think of complex system, you can think of the clouds. You can see that the clouds constantly moving, constantly changing the shape and form. So the complex system is like that. So the complex system consists of interrelated parts that are constantly changing and also interconnect with other systems. And each system and its elements are unique. So you can see that each cloud are unique. The system that is not complex, for example, a clock consists of the parts that are relatively more static. And also you can actually replicate each of the clock system pretty much. So it's not necessarily unique. And we're dealing with the complex system every day. For example, if any one of you want to tackle environmental challenges, that's the complex system. And to tackle complex system, that's why we also need system thinking. So system thinking is a holistic approach that helps us to understand interconnections and interdependence of a system, and also help us to make sense of and make change in complex systems. So why system thinking? So system thinking allows us to see a bigger picture, to understand, kind of float and then see the whole forest instead of just a tree, and then how the parts interrelate as well. It also helps us to think deeper and discover underlying structures and mental models that actually drive the behaviors of the system. And I think Chris will, go and explain all the details of the heart and the all the core concepts of the mental iceberg model. The system thinking also allow us to act smarter. We can actually identify the leverage point in the system in which we can actually put less effort or minimal effort and then achieve a large impact to the system, and also reduce the unintended consequences because we actually understand the interrelationships between parts in the system. So over to you, Chris.
So another thing to think about, one of the core concepts with systems thinking is the importance of different perspectives. Everything that we're trying to learn about and understand better is highly complex matter. And there's absolutely no way any one of us can fully understand it, comprehensively in a way where we can address it better by ourselves than we could by working with others who have different perspectives. The blind man and the elephant is a great metaphor for that. It's a story, an old story about 6 blind men who address an elephant, and they run into it in different places. So one touches the tail, thinks it's a rope. One touches its side, thinks it's a wall. One touches the leg, thinks it's a log. One touches the trunk, it thinks it's a snake. One touches the trunk, thinks it's a tusk. And one touches the ear and thinks it's a fan. So they just argue because no one wants to listen to each other, and they just fight over it and say, I'm right. And if they would just share and come to an understanding, they would go, oh, it's an elephant. So that's just something to think about anytime you're working with systems. It's very easy, I think, when we're taught to deal with more of complicated instead of complex problems, something we'll talk about more later, to think of things as being something we can solve by ourselves. We're taught to try to solve problems by ourselves. Complex matters, systems problems, we need to look at it from other people's perspectives and bring in that information and work together to try to figure out how to solve those problems. Next slide. So quick question, is this a system? You've got every part of the car in that picture. Quick, can I get a thumbs up or thumbs down? We don't have thumbs down, that's right, we only do thumbs up. Never mind, I will just jump ahead. Go to the next slide, Prewan, and I'll answer the question. So this is Prewan, Can you go to the next one? I think yeah, I have animations here. Thank you. But just go back to the last, sorry, with everything there. So this is all of the parts of a car, but if it's not put together and working, we don't consider it a working system. It has everything right there. If you don't have the knowledge to put it together, you can't make it into a system. Someone who knows how to put a car together can put it together, and then they've got a working system. The car works, then it's a working system. It does what it was supposed to do, get you around. If you put that car together and you make one mistake that keeps it from working, the spark plugs aren't in there right, so the engine doesn't fire, you don't have a working system until you fix that problem. Okay, next slide. Okay, I'm not going to show this video. It's much too long for today, but I highly recommend going to look on YouTube for if Russ Akoff had given a TED Talk. It's about 15 minutes long. The language is a little rough in a few places, so I'll warn you about that. But no better broad overview of systems thinking that I've found yet. So definitely highly recommended to check that out between now and the next time we meet. Next slide. Okay, we're going to take a really short break here. We're doing pretty good on time. Let's say about 4 minutes. We'll send you guys to breakouts with about 4 or 5 people. And what we want you to do is to take a look at these questions that we've got up here and just kind of share a little bit for what you've heard so far. So get a chance to meet a few people and share a bit, and hopefully lock in some of that learning before we move on. So we go ahead and go to breakouts. Go ahead and join your breakouts and join the conversation, guys. I think we're doing pretty okay on time. What do you think, Courtney?
So I have breakouts scheduled for 6 minutes.
Okay.
And I need to join one, and I need to figure out how to join one.
You just pick one in the breakouts menu.
Okay, great.
I'll do the same.
Now.
Ooh,
Great, welcome back, everybody. I'm going to ask Prewa to reshare the screen, and just note that we should be back in the same breakout rooms, the same group. If you didn't get to finish your full conversation, we'll be back together soon.
Are we moving on?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. I want to go back. I was enjoying the conversation too much.
We'll get back to it soon. Go ahead, Chris.
All right, we're gonna jump into. I'm gonna teach a little bit about the iceberg model, which is a way of looking at a system and trying to understand it better. And then once I get done sharing, the overview of it, we're going to go into a nice long stretch in the breakouts where we'll try to pick apart a problem. So let's go ahead and go on to the next slide. Okay, so an iceberg model at a very, very high level, what you have is observable phenomenon, the things that you can actually observe, things like events, action, outcomes. In my world, which is recycling, this is like plastic waste ending up on the street. That's the thing I see, or it's in nature or in the ocean or whatever. Below the line, below the water of that iceberg, you've got way more mass. You've got all the things that underlie the outcome that you don't see. So assumptions, culture, beliefs, values, attitudes, perspectives, misunderstandings, all these things that don't normally come to mind when you're thinking about, man, I'm not happy with the fact that that plastic's on the beach. Next slide. Oh, let's skip the animations. Okay. So examples, like I said, plastic waste in the ocean, and then below the line, examples of reasons that are underpinning that: underdeveloped collection systems, poor understanding of what can be recycled, lack of awareness, regulatory channels, our challenges, loads and loads of potential things underlying factors that are leading to that problem. Next slide. And then, we already had events, action, and outcomes as your observable phenomenon. Below the water, you've got 3 different categories of growing importance. You have patterns of behavior. So you see that plastic waste in the ocean. The pattern of behavior is you see that lots of people are not recycling and the stuff ends up in places we don't want it. Underlying structures are things like the city doesn't have a great collection system. Or maybe there's not a great awareness of the problem, things that are leading to the patterns of behavior. And then at the bottom is your mental models. This is how we look at things, how we understand the world, our values and our beliefs and things like that, which lead to the structures and the patterns of behavior and the outcomes that we don't want. Next slide. So when we look at these things, if we're living above the waterline, we see plastic waste that's on the beach, all we can do is react and clean it up. That's our only option. The problem has already occurred. If we look at the patterns of behavior, if we watch this happening over time, we can start to anticipate that that's going to happen again and start thinking about, well, what can we do to change this? And when we get to that point, we can look at the underlying structure. Well, what are the systems that are in place that are failing us, that we're not capturing this plastic and recycling it, or that we're not using less plastic or whatever. And then if we look on it, and those are the things that we can design and redesign. And then at the bottom level, the mental model, the way we view the world, that's the place where if we can change that, we can transform the entire thing and potentially have massive, massive impact, where at the top of the model, you can save 1 bottle at a time. At the bottom of the model, you might have completely transformed the system and we don't use bottles anymore. Okay, next slide. So just looking at this from a few other ways, if you look from the bottom here, mental models generate structure, structure influences behavior, and behavior leads to the outcomes. Next slide. And we will make these slides available to you guys when you go to the breakout, so don't worry. And just to drive home the point, the farther you go down the iceberg, the more leverage you have to drive impact.
Chris, can I chime in a little bit on the mental models? Just to give example, I talked with the head of the Green Party, and he made an interesting observation about the language that we use to call nature. In the old days, we used to, we actually view nature as families. Like we have this word called Mother River, Pame Kongka, or Mother Nature. But then in the modern era, we use the word natural resources. So, that actually reflect the mental models that we have towards the changing mental model that we, have towards the nature. So right now it's become the resources that we want to exploit. Mm-hmm. So, from that mental model, we kind of create the structure that, try to exploit the nature instead of respecting the nature as well.
Yeah, if we call it a resource, it's a thing to be exploited, right? Absolutely. Good point. Thank you, Prewa. All right, I think that's all of the overview slides. Is that correct? Can you go to the next one, Courtney? Great. So now we want to go to our breakouts. I think how many breakout groups did we have, Courtney? We have 6.
What would be great, I think, is just to kind of show people if you can share your screen of the mural board, how it works. And then we can go to that. We're going to have the same groups as we already introduced initially.
How many do we have?
We have 5 groups.
Okay.
Yep.
Got the links for that. So let me share my screen and show these.
And we'll go ahead and put in the chat box the mural.
So I stopped sharing now.
I just took it. Okay. So you guys should be able to see the template. Can you guys see that? in Mural? Can you guys see this?
Yes, we
Yes,
can
yes.
see it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, in Mural, it's pretty easy to pick up if you haven't used before. Over on the right-hand side, you've got the outline. Click on Start Here, and it'll start giving you instructions, and you click through. Step 0, name your challenge. Step 3 or step 1 is number 3 in here. Use Post-its to share your events, actions, and outcomes. And there's a little extra info and example with each one. So you just click through, and every time you click, it's going to take you to that part on the board so you can fill it in. And if I can just take a step back, anytime you want to look at the big picture, click back on Start Here, and it's going to show you the whole template. Over on the left are all of your tools that are available. The first one is text. Click on that, and it's going to show you, you can just write text or you can throw sticky notes, which is what we'll probably mostly use. You grab a sticky note, drag it out here. You can zoom in with your mouse by scrolling up, type your text, and you've got a sticky note on the board. Okay, it's really easy. If you want to make it bigger, you can do that, but try to be respectful of the group. Don't take up too much room.
And just a process point, just wanted to let people know that we're not expecting you to work all by yourself. So, but we do want to have a few minutes at the beginning where we collect, or we settle on a little bit of a topic area so that we can be deconstructing it together. So, and then have a few moments where you have a moment to add your thoughts. If you cannot actually access Mural in today's session, you can type it in the chat box, and then all the facilitators are going to be able to copy and paste it into the Mural for you. But just wanted to give you the big picture first. So when we meet in our breakout rooms in just a moment, we'll discuss which topic we want to dive into. Maybe it's a new one that's not there as a possible topic. And then we have about 15 minutes to work collectively to see what we can come up with.
Yeah, and if you're on like a phone, you probably won't be able to interact. So just share in the chat in Zoom with the ideas that you'd like to put on the board. Yeah, Courtney, Prewa, anything else we need to share before we go to the breakouts?
Oh, we have Circular Design Lab facilitators in all the rooms, so no worries. If you still have questions, we can answer them. I'll go ahead and move us to breakouts.
Before we go, I'm gonna put the links in here in chat so that everybody has them. So there you go. Your link should be there by your group number. Okay, we can go. Hello, did you just join us?
Hi, yeah. Actually, I was just dropped out because the electricity at my house it was broken.
Oh,
So
no.
I think I was in the room number 2.
Okay, I will put you in there. Give me just a second.
Okay, please. Thank you.
Sure. Oh, that's the wrong place. Breakout rooms. All right, there you go. See you in a bit. We'll have everyone back here in just a moment.
All right, welcome back, everybody. How's everyone?
Great.
So serious. All these, where's the smiles? So we're gonna need to wrap up quite soon. I did want to mention, Chris, that I have a Mentimeter to share at the very, very end, but over to you to lead us through some of the debrief and next steps.
Okay, just, there we go. Okay, just very quickly, hope that was interesting and enjoyable. We know it was probably too fast, but we wanted to try to do just a quick teaser with that exercise to help you guys look at things a little differently and get a little bit of an experience working with that sort of model. Next month, we'll be coming back together